Hey, what's up YouTube? So I've decided to make a care video on veiled chameleons. I've had quite a few people asking me for some. What we're looking at are my 3 adult veiled chameleons. All 3 were rescues. They all 3 had metabolic bone disease to some degree. The first one here is Smeagol. Smeagol actually had it the worst. When he first came to me, he couldn't even grab onto these branches that you see here. He would just fall down several times a day. He also has almost no use in this tail here. His legs are deformed. He really cannot support his own body weight. And his head is a little deformed as well. Honestly, when I got him, I thought he was going to die. But he didn't. Right here is Wolverine. He had the least severe of the 3 of metabolic bone disease. And his deformities are barely anything at all. You really can't even tell. He looks pretty much like a normal male veiled chameleon. His tail tip had to be amputated off because the previous owner smashed it in the cage door, and the tip went dead and had to be removed. Over here is Mystique. She had moderate metabolic bone disease. She does have visible deformities. Nothing as bad as the first one that I showed you. And she was burnt on the very top. Here, I don't know if you can see it. Right there. She was burned by a heat lamp right behind her head there. Where it looks kind of smooth, that's a burn. So anyway, we're going to talk about caring for these veiled chameleons that I have. I have them all in screen cages, and this is for maximum airflow. You'll also see that I have visible dividers here where they cannot see each other. This is because veiled chameleons like to be housed by themselves, and if they see each other, they can get stressed out. You also see I have lots of climbing branches from the top to the bottom, so that they can move around wherever they want to go. I also have plenty of foliage in here, but not too much. You want to have, room enough for them to get around. I don't have too much in Smeagol's because he does have a hard time walking around and getting from place to place. But he still does need the foliage, and the reason why is because watering. Veiled chameleons do not drink standing water out of bowls, so they need to be misted. You can also use a dripper, or you can place ice cubes on the very top of the screen here, and as they melt, it'll drip onto the leaves. The chameleons will walk over to the leaves and drink the water off. I mist all my chameleons at least twice a day, and I also use the dripper with the ice cubes. That's what the dripper looks like up there. I do have a live plant called Pothos in here. They can nibble on this. It's perfectly safe for them. They do like to eat vegetation from time to time. I also have a UVA UVB light and a basking light. The UV light is a 5.0, and that's used for tropical species. What's in the basking lamp is actually just a regular 60-watt household bulb. The reason for this is because they don't need really high heat basking temps. In the mid to upper 90s is just fine. No higher than that, or they'll get burned like Mystique did here. I also line each cage with newspaper. This is because you don't want to use any substrate with chameleons. No eco-earth, moss, sand, pebbles, nothing like that. The reason why is whenever they're sticking their tongues out to eat their prey items, they can accidentally ingest it. They won't be able to poop, and then they die. Now you'll see here I have food bowls, and I put their insects in these bowls, and this is so that the insects aren't, they're not all climbing around everywhere. 1 or 2 do get out, but for the most part they stay in the bowls, and the chameleons just walk down there and eat them out. I do feed them about a dozen insects every other day. I feed them roaches, crickets, different types of caterpillars like hornworms, silkworms, butterworms, I also do feed some superworms, but their main diet consists of roaches and crickets. It's because worms can be kind of fattening. All insects are gut loaded before I feed them to my chameleons. And this means that I feed them nutritious things like fresh fruits and veggies. I do supplement my chameleons. I give them calcium once a week, and I give them a multivitamin once a month. The calcium that I use is plain calcium without the added D3, the vitamin D3. And the reason for this is because I'm using a UV light. The UV light allows a reptile to produce its own vitamin D through a process called vitamin D synthesis in their skin. And they get that from the UVB that's let off here from this light. But because, no UV light is as good as natural sunlight, whenever I do my multivitamin, the multivitamin has the vitamin D3 in it. Now, with female veiled chameleons, they will lay eggs, even if they've never bred with a male. And whenever they're ready to lay eggs, you'll notice like her belly will get bigger. Sometimes you can see the eggs kind of sticking out through. She might go to the bottom here and dig around at the corners. And at that time you need to place her in an egg laying bin. My egg laying bin is this big trash can here. It's about halfway filled with dirt. It has a climbing branch in there and some foliage. I've put screen over the top. And whenever I put her in here to lay her eggs, I put her lights over top too. I put her basking light here and then just run her UV right across. She'll get in there and she'll dig maybe like 2 or 3 tunnels. And it usually takes just a few days. And she'll pick one of the tunnels and then she'll go in there backwards and then lay her eggs and then cover the eggs up with the dirt. And then whenever she's done, I just put her back in her cage and I mist and feed her immediately. This is because the whole time that they're digging and laying their eggs, they tend to not eat or drink anything at all. So they're very tired, very exhausted from laying the eggs. So you want to make sure they get hydrated and fed right away. Sometimes they can actually die from laying the eggs if they're not healthy. They don't have enough fat on them before they start laying the eggs. So you want to make sure that they are in prime condition and healthy before they're laying their eggs. And then right again afterwards. Make sure they're eating and drinking. All right, so here's some of Mystique and Wolverine's babies. These are about a month old. Whenever the difference between caring for the little tiny baby veiled chameleons rather than the adults is you want to not use a heat lamp. You don't want to use a heat lamp for these guys until they're a bit older. That's because they can get kind of overwhelmed with the heat. You just want to use UV on them. Also, whenever you're dusting with the calcium, instead of doing it once a week, I usually do it like 3 times a week. At this size, they eat the little pinhead crickets, and they'll also eat fruit flies. And you do have to mist them more often. I mist these guys like 5 times a day. As you can see, I have water deposits all over my all over my glass here, and it's kind of hard to see in. All right, so let's see if Mystique will eat. I love their tongues. So some differences on males and females. The females don't live as long as the males do. The females typically live about 3 to 5 years. The males live usually around 7 to 10 years. Is that good? And she's looking at me. They also have really cool eyes. They can look in 2 different places at one time. Very cool. Alright, so the personalities of these veiled chameleons. You see I'm holding Wolverine here. He actually does like to come out and be held. Most veiled chameleons do not like to come out and interact with people. Mine don't mind. Wolverine is the only one that actually seeks out attention, and he comes right to the door and wants to come out. He actually likes to be held. I think he's afraid of this camera. Are you afraid of the camera?